Hey, Buff Nation, voice of the Buffs, Mark Johnson here. Welcome to the Buffs Insider, our podcast here at the University of Colorado. Now, normally our podcast is an audio version of a podcast, but because of the topic matter today and who we're having on, we thought, why not do a video version of this one? It was June 23rd, 1972. Then President Richard Nixon signed into law groundbreaking legislation, Title IX, altered the landscape of college athletics for the better. And here to talk about it with us today, legendary coach Ceal. She doesn't need an introduction, but she certainly deserves one. She's in every Hall of Fame you can possibly think of. I was joking with her, all but the future farmers of America. But Coach, it's great to have you here.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, man. Well, Title IX, you think 50 years has gone by. Now, if I am correct in this, you would have been about a senior in high school, I think, when this was signed into law.
I was.
You were on your way to Kentucky to play college basketball. So you saw this from its infancy as a player into being a coach, to not that many years later to administrator. When I say Title IX to you, what do you think about it?
Well, it was interesting, you know, as a high school athlete, when it was passed, or even a college athlete, we didn't know anything about Title IX. Nothing. I started working in the University of Kentucky Women's Athletic Department, which was in the Intramurals and Rec Center. That's where women's athletics was. And the women's AG at that point said there's this law, Title IX, which, you know, you're 20 years old. It didn't really mean it. I was like, yeah, well, somebody else can worry about that.
Right.
I've got practice or whatever. But it passed, and yeah, it was kind of went right by us.
Yeah, at the time. He didn't realize the magnitude of what was happening.
Not in the least until, well, as I said, I was a student worker.
Right.
And one of my jobs was to open the mail. You know, student worker, open the pile of mail, here it comes. And I started opening these job descriptions for head women's basketball coach. And I was like, wow, there is no such thing. There are no teams.
Right.
I mean, but universities across the country were hiring their very first women's basketball, full-time women's basketball coach. So here I was, an accounting major, and I was like, I'm not going to be a CPA. I'm going to go be a basketball coach. This is great. That's when it really started to resonate.
Yeah, I would think at that point in time, even though you're a little bit naive to what's going on, all of a sudden the world begins to open up a little bit.
Oh,
right? The opportunities were out there.
And it was a floodgate.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the first superstar basketball player was Annie Drysdale, Annie Myers, UCLA. She led UCLA to the 1978 national championship, and then married Don Drysdale and got a lot of publicity nationally. She was the first female, I think, along with Carol Blazejowski, but on the West Coast. But yeah, it was a floodgates. Yeah.
So, and you touched on it, talking about, you know, athletics for the women being in the intramurals department. Kind of give folks that maybe don't know that history what it was like. Women's athletics was club sports? Is that how you describe it?
Women's athletics was club sports.
Yeah.
And even prior to the 70s, they had play days, which, you know, lemonade and cookies after the game. You'd play the local school. For example, CU would probably play Metro or maybe Regis, but, you know, where you could drive down, play the game, have lemonade and cookies after, and socialize. It was much more social. By the time I got to college, we were past the play days, but it would be a typical situation where you'd have 2 vans, put 10 people in each van, 4 to a room, and Ceal, bring $20 for the weekend for your meals. We'll stop at McDonald's. You know, so the university did not supply food, uniforms.
Right.
Uniforms were totally haphazard. Yeah, I mean, people would sew their numbers on a blouse and wear it. It was out of control. It was a lot of fun, but we were competitive, and it was interesting, Mark. I lived through the time where we were kind of paupers the first 2 years, and then all of a sudden we had a charter flight, charter buses. My junior, senior year, I got a scholarship. It was like, whoa, this is nice. I like it.
So you then, and Sue went to the University of Kentucky. It's where you played college basketball. So you saw major changes then over the course of your 4 years in Lexington.
Huge changes. I mean, I went to school with Goose Givens, Jack Givens, James Lee, Rick Roby, you know. So they were in the, you know, the big gym.
Right.
We were over in the rec center playing. And they roll out the bleachers, you know, 20 minutes before the game, a couple student workers would roll out the bleachers. Yeah, I watched us go from have not to have, and to, you know, just tip of the iceberg, starting to be treated like the guys team. And we all knew there was a heck of a lot to get done, but we're super grateful, super appreciative. Anything we got, oh, we don't have to pay our meals this trip. My entire collegiate career, there was always 4 to a room, so it was hard to sleep. It was hard to get your rest. It wasn't until well into my career here at Colorado, even when I first started coaching, there were 4 women to a room. But we were, every year you got more,
Sure.
as opposed to less. So the whole culture of coaches in my era were super appreciative. Oh, wow, that's great. This year we get that.
Yeah.
But there was somebody above us helping us out.
So there was gratitude, but was there an idea, well, this is the first step in a process?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And when I say there's gratitude, the large percentage of women were grateful. But there were probably a small percentage of women that were resentful, full of resentment that it had taken so long, we're not getting enough.
Right.
I absolutely saw the future.
Yeah.
It was like, I can remember the very first televised game, women's game. So you knew it wasn't going to stop at one game.
Yeah.
Tennessee was starting to replace Immaculata, Old Dominion. And I knew the future was in a large school, not a Delta State, Immaculata, Old Dominion, Cheney State. Those were the late 70s teams. That the larger schools with the larger football programs, facilities, budgets, were going to be the future of women's sports. You could see that. I mean, if you had your eyes open and you were watching.
So it wasn't that many years and you were coaching. By what, 1978, 79 or so?
Yeah,
Roughly in Cincinnati,
right
correct?
Uh-huh.
Around that area you became a coach. Was there another leap by the time you became a coach? You think, boy, this thing is really picking up steam and it's starting to advance and progress?
Yes, when I took the coaching job, and this is a fact I'd kind of like to share. Most of the coaches, I was 23 when I was offered the job. By the time I signed the contract, I was 24. I was one of the youngest head coaches in the nation at that point. The big fear for me is my players are my age.
Right.
They're in my peer group, and how am I going to be an authority figure to them at such a young age? How do I separate? Because I knew you had to have that. I'd been around male sports enough, and having gone to Catholic schools in Louisville, we had sports. So, I had very good role model of what a coach should look like with their team. But here I was their age. But then I was thrust into this role of expectation. Thankfully, no one put that much pressure on me to go in and pound my fist on the table and ask for things. Here's what I thought. If you win, they will give you more stuff.
There you go. If you build, they will come, right? It's a Field of Dreams philosophy.
I thought, we win, we'll get stuff.
Yeah.
And so that was the way I did it. It was a lot more fun for everybody.
Do you think, were there times, and every circumstance is going to be different, so depending on, I suppose, what institution, maybe what part of the country you're at, did you find on one side you've got the gratefulness of all the women who are getting the opportunity now? Did you notice there was resentment on the other side?
Well, there was a huge amount of resentment. The NCAA fought Title IX. Before it actually was implemented, there was a 3-year period where it kind of floundered around in the courts. Because the NCAA was like, we're not ready to take on women yet. They're going to be a drain on the budget. And, probably so. Yeah, you got to hire a coach. You got to have like 5 more teams. You got to balance out football. I mean, when you look at all the laundry list of Title IX, of all the things that you have to do for it, it's going to be a little costly.
Well, it's everything times 2.
Absolutely. Right. And so it was based on fear. So, there was a kind of an antagonistic viewpoint. The hardest part was being the first one to come into the training room, the first one to expect that, okay, laundry is going to be done for our athlete. The equipment guy, the head trainer, they were like, we don't have staff. We don't have time. We don't have the budget. So it was left up to them really to figure out how to make it work. And a lot of times they weren't given the resources. So there was an underlying resentment, yeah, for a long time. You know, there's still some leftover of that, but you can't really I didn't ever focus on at all.
Well, there's going to be the effects of anything you do that you think about, right? The obvious things. And then there are the maybe things that you don't consider when you're going to this. And you kind of touched on, okay, there's training room time, there's a lot of practice court time.
Oh.
I mean, it becomes, I don't, and that to this day is still a back and forth between coaches, no matter where you're at. So there were a lot of unintended issues that everybody had to deal with at that point in time for a number of years.
You know, that's one of the things that attracted me to CU. A guy named John Barianic, who was a long time business manager, you know, associate AD. I interviewed out here in April of '83, came out, and John told me right away, this was so refreshing. He said, now the way we work it is, you know, the men are going to go 1 to 3:30 in the fall, and the women will go 3:30 to 5:30.
Okay.
Then you go, back then we didn't have training table for women's basketball. Then you go to the residence halls for meals. And in the spring semester, we flip-flop.
All right.
Then the women go first, and this was 1983. Not a lot of people do that. 4 years later, I interviewed someplace,
right,
and I won't share.
Well, here I thought you was going to break some news.
No breaking news. But during the meeting with the athletic director, the men were practicing 2 to 6 at this institution, and I said, okay, so the women, how about if the women go 12 to 2:30? I needed 2.5 hours. That's what I'd gotten here, and the men, maybe they could go 2:30 to 6:30 because they had training table. Yeah. He goes, no, can't do that. And I said, why not? He goes, because the staff plays noon ball. The guys play noon ball. And I'm like, I'm going back west.
So the noon ball was more important than your varsity sport.
Than the varsity sport, which told me a whole lot. So that was '88. I interviewed at this place, and so there was still a lot that noon ball is going to be important, more important Division I team, and you could get away with that.
Sure.
And they did. And it took them 20 years before they could ever get a basketball coach to stay. But yeah.
You know, you mentioned football being in the equation. That's been kind of the one, I don't want to say albatross, but it's kind of the fly in the ointment, isn't it, with college athletics when we talk Title IX, because it does throw the numbers a little bit out of whack, doesn't it?
It does, and that has to do with equity, gender equity, mandates that for your full ride scholarships, which football has 85, but back then I want to say they had 105.
Right.
They had more than 85. That you have to balance out your dollars with women's sports. So if you have men's and women's golf team, okay, have 10 and 10. If you have men's and women's basketball, have 14 and 14.
Right.
You know, so on and so forth down the line.
But then you get the football.
But then you get football, and you go, how do you do that? So you add lacrosse, you add volleyball, you add soccer, you keep adding women's sports, and in a way it's frustrating because those sports became part-time scholarships.
Right.
Because you could count their participants. 35 soccer players, you could count them against the football players. But the women were getting 10% aid, 25% aid, 50% aid. So I, the accountant in me comes out and said, we got to figure out a better way to do that. My feeling is everybody should be on a full ride. Everybody. If you're on a team, you run cross country for us and you run 65 miles a week, you get a full ride.
Right.
You play soccer for us, they all should.
Yeah.
They should figure that out.
Have they, in terms of, because of the economics of football and the way it generates, has there been a tendency, do you think, to maybe not try to make everything totally equal because it is such a monster financial generating machine? Right,
and essentially that's a television contract.
Yes.
You know, you're getting those TV contracts that want football.
Correct.
And that's a lot of money. You know, it's hard when you talk operating budget for football. Of course it's going to be different. But it's part of the equation that needs to be hammered out, as best I can say.
As you sit here today, now 50 years into this, from you're a high school senior, and now you're sitting here looking at this anniversary of Title IX, are you amazed? Are you looking at it and say, well, it's what I expected? It hasn't quite met what I expected? How do you look at it?
You know, the big fear, Mark, there was a governing body called the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, and that was the governing body. They did not want recruiting. They didn't want scholarships. They didn't want these women, and I coached in the AIAW, did not want the pitfalls of men's sports. The
Okay.
cheating, the
Yeah.
scandals, the whatever negative side.
Let's take the good but not the bad part of it. Yeah.
They wanted the good but not the bad. So there was a big fight in 78, 79 when the NCAA finally was like, okay, if you can't beat them, join them. Let's bring them on. We're going to host championships. In 82, they started hosting championships. So now the women came on board. I think everything that's happened has been wonderful.
Right.
Professional sports for women. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's what every little girl dreams of.
Yeah.
If boys dream of it playing in the NFL or playing in the NBA, girls dream of, who wouldn't want a lifetime of sports?
Without question.
What a great way. But some of the negative side, the negative culture, or the cottage industries that are really all about money and infiltrate the purity of collegiate sports, that's the side. If I have discussions with my peers, we all kind of like the good old days.
Yeah.
We all kind of like the late 70s and the 80s. Everybody loves the 80s, where we were getting things, but we were still amateur, and we like to say we were educators. So I don't think it's as much about education as it used to be. It's year round. I don't like that collegiate athletes participate. They don't participate year round. They practice year round. They lift year round. They're here in the summer year round. I hate that. I think they should be off.
You know, what you're talking about in terms of when you mentioned professional sports. So Title IX looks to level the playing surface, if you will, for men and women in college athletics. And it has spawned all you're talking about. It spawned the WNBA.
Yeah.
It spawned the women's national soccer team, which, you know, has made such phenomenal impacts in our society. It really is amazing to see kind of the fruit of the tree, isn't it?
Well, in addition to that, you know, the law didn't really mention sports, and it didn't really mention women. It just said programming needs to be available. So a female in 1980 now had a good chance of going to law school.
Right.
Or a good chance of going to med school. Or you walk on a airplane, you might see a female pilot now. I mean, a judge. We're just waiting for the next female who will be president of the United States. I think what the law did was not just open up opportunity in athletics. That's what got all the attention.
Right.
But what it did was open up every single one of these buildings on this campus to say, you have an equal chance of getting into that engineering school over there, regardless of whether you're a male or a female. And it did the same thing for a male. If you had a long line of violinists who played in the orchestra and they were all women,
right, and
the leader said, well, you can't play the violin, we only have girls. That's the idea of Title IX, that gender isn't in the equation of who gets an opportunity to try.
It is always amazing, though, and in hindsight, our vision is always much greater, of course. You know, it was interesting listening to you talk about when it happened, when it was signed by Richard Nixon in 1972. Not even sure what this is all about. You become a coach. Well, great, we're getting some more opportunities. Yeah. And now you look back at it 50 years later and you understand the pivot that our culture made at that point in time.
Absolutely. And when right, we were there. It was not front page news, the Title IX. It wasn't on the sports page. I can guarantee you that, because I read the sports page. Title IX being passed, it might have been way back on the fifth page that this law passed. But I don't think, to be honest with you, Mark, in 1972, 73, people did not believe that it would ever be implemented.
Right.
I think there was a general feeling that, yeah, right, you're going to have girls. I mean, the only women in athletics departments were secretaries. Now picture that.
Yeah.
Secretaries, that is it. I mean, look at it now.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of women ADs, but
you walk down the hallways of the Champions Center, and it's probably a 50-50 split, men and women right now.
Right.
Totally
so
changed.
Really, in reality, it's like saying, oh yeah, we'll walk on the moon someday, or we'll do. I don't think the majority of athletes, people really thought, we're gonna bust down this wall, but save for a few women that really led the charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we are today, a totally different world, athletically speaking, 50 years celebrating the anniversary, the signing into law of Title IX. You know, you touched on where athletics has gone, and I've got her captive right now so I can ask you these questions. You spent so many years as a coach, obviously, administrator. The game is changing dramatically. When you kind of read now about what's going on with NIL and with the transfer portal, what are your
You
views
know,
on
the
that?
whole NIL thing, I wonder how that impacts the locker room and team chemistry.
Amen.
You know, and that's from my background in the sports where one student will get 10% financial aid and another student gets 80% financial aid. We see that in a lot of our softballs that way, soccer's that way, cross country, track. You know, and it causes a tension
Sure
in
it
the
does.
locker room. You know, like I'm starting, I'm on 10%. You're sitting the bench and you've, you know, put on 20 pounds and didn't do anything over the summer and you're on 90% aid. You know, people don't like that you're getting paid more than me
Yep.
and I'm working harder.
Yep.
And so, especially if it's used to incentivize someone to come to schools, which it is.
It certainly is.
You know, and there was all this rhetoric that, oh, it won't be used to recruit. Well, of course it's going to be used to recruit. Absolutely. People are dangling that carrot. If you come here, I'm going to give you this much money and you're not going to have to do anything for it.
Right.
Except show up and you know, give us your name. And you know, that doesn't win games on the field. You give a 17-year-old a lot of money,
Yep.
and you want that 17-year-old to work hard and pay attention to you, not the guy that gave you the money.
Amen.
You know, so, and you have agents involved. So I think it was a huge mistake, and I know a lot of people were advocating. I know that coaches make a lot of money, athletic directors make a lot of money, referees make a lot of money, and maybe we should have fixed that. Fix that is who's getting a piece of the pie, or done a better job explaining to student athletes. You know, here are some of the things that we're using this money for. I think most 19-year-olds. They love the gear.
Yeah.
They love the food.
Right.
They love the road trips. They love the charter flights. They love their teammates. I don't think they were necessarily leading the charge on this.
Yes.
Some people who were not in the locker room were leading the charge, and that's what's sad to me.
Well, there's an old line I heard that I've loved for years, and it says that first you learn, then you drop the L. Okay, so you learn, then you earn, right? And that's kind of the process. And we've kind of muddied the waters and dirtied the waters here with college athletics a little bit.
Well, and you put a lot more pressure on a 19-year-old kid. Now you're telling this kid they're supposed to earn money. Well, you used to tell the kid you're supposed to lift weights.
Yeah, yeah.
You're supposed to run, lift weights, work our camp in the summer, and have a little off time. Now they're looking at how many likes they have in social media, and are they an influencer, and you're putting things into their head that they are supposed to be right now, instead of the good old days when we went to college and we'd come over here and, you know, where's the next party or whatever. You know, I don't think they get to be college kids. I mean, who really was expected to earn 25, 30,000 when they went to college?
Right.
Who was expected to, I mean, you're not expected to that. You're supposed to get an education, and that's gotten lost in the shuffle.
Well, and what you talk about right there, the education, and we know, you know, Rick George here at the University of Colorado preaches all the time, you know, make sure our student athletes have a world-class education and experience.
Yeah.
And you know as well as anybody here, all that goes into that, from the mental health to the nutrition to the medical care to the tutoring. It's enormous what a young man or young woman experiences here at the University of Colorado, and there's great value in all that, on top of the fact you're getting this institution behind us, a world-class education.
Yeah, and you mentioned mental health. Some of these mental health issues have to do with time, as in no time off.
Yeah.
They don't get a time off. There's pressure coming at them from every side. And for some student athletes coming in, it could be their family. You know,
Correct.
you have to be successful. You have to perform so that you can bring in that added revenue. We put them in a position of breadwinner for some percentage of kids to be a breadwinner at a young age, but they should have more time to themselves to explore, to meet people, to decide what they like. They're still 19.
That's an
and
age where you're trying to figure out who you are.
And they
Right.
were 19 in 1979, 1989, and I think we're putting way too much pressure. The incidence of mental health issues, suicidal ideation, those sorts of things are increasing. It's because we're asking too much of them.
Yeah, I'd agree. How about with the transfer portal? Now, the idea that, when a young man or young woman signed with an institution and a coach jumps ship, they're locked in right there. I know there were many for a long time that thought there's got to be some way to navigate that and allow some kids some freedom. What's been your view of that?
Well, coaches preach, I preach all the time, commitment. You've got to stay committed to the values of our program. And, it started with coaches not living up to their commitment. They were jumping ship before the players jumped ship. Coaches in football who left prior to the bowl game, whether they're a coordinator, you can always explain it away. I got a job offer.
Right.
Well, we have a bowl game. I thought we were committed. We got a bowl game in January.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. What happened to a commitment? So you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. And so I blame the coaches for this because they preach commitment. We all preach commitment and then don't live up to our own commitments. And, I didn't like leaving one program. When I left Cincinnati to come here, I had to tell 14 players that I'm not living up to my commitment.
Right.
And they're like, all that BS she told us, now she's out there to the Rocky Mountains. That's why I didn't want to do it again. So, you have to do it maybe, once or twice in your career. But as it relates to the transfer portal, I don't think we're teaching kids how resilience, how to get through adversity. The grass is greener on the other side. If I go over to this school,
yep.
I'm not going to have to do, she makes me up at 6 a.m. and do that, or she makes me do this drill and it's a stupid drill. Every kid whines. They all whine.
Exactly. We all do.
Yeah. And what you're teaching them is, it's a dumb drill, but if I tell you to do the drill, it's because I have a reason. So just trust me on this. That drill's going to help you. They never get through that. They're like, I'm out of here. I'm going over there. Some of these kids are transferring 3 times.
Yes, so we do games, and it's a frequent thing. I'm doing a ball game, and somebody's been at 3, 4 schools by this point in time.
And the part of it I really don't like. I don't like it. A lot of things I don't like, but you get to do that in old age. But is in conference. Within the conference, because they all recruit the same kids, they recruit the same footprint. Now you're going through the handshake line, and you see an assistant coach stop. And they're chit-chatting up the kid that they lost to that school.
Yep.
And
it's happening.
Give me a call if things don't go well.
Right,
You've got my number.
It's happening the other direction where kids are saying to coaches, hey, coach, I'd be interested. And so I've had many coaches tell me that kids are approaching them in handshake lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And no coach is going to say, hey, you need to honor your commitment. They're going to say that, but they don't say that. They go, here, you got my number. And
it depends how good the player is, right?
Right, right. So I think there's a lot of familiarity inside conferences. In the transferring inside the conference, it feels, you always got to be vigilant, and that's why the SWA position is so important. That you have a strong person in that role who's not afraid. Yeah.
Well, she did a phenomenal job in that role here at the University of Colorado as a senior women's administrator. Always great to see. We miss seeing her around the hallways of the Champion Center.
I miss being there.
The great Ceal Berry joining us here today as we talk about the 50th anniversary of Title IX. In fact, this is going to be a celebration all throughout the upcoming sports season, all through the summer, into the fall, and into the spring here at the University of Colorado. I'm Voice of the Buffs, Mark Johnson. Thanks for joining us this time on the Buffs Insider.